The jury's in. Viewers want more of the Honorable David Harwell. Catch part 2 coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the South Carolina Employment Security Commission's Coastal Workforce Center on Victory Lane in Conway, serving the entire Grand Strand. We're focused on part 2 of the Honorable David Harwell. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid there's some folks who weren't with us yesterday morning. They're tuning in for the part-time. They're not going to know anything about who the Honorable David Harwell is, so we got to do a couple of quick things. But, of course, a lot of folks have seen your name, as we talked about yesterday, driving over the Great Petey River. What caused anyone to give you or to name a bridge for you over there in Florence?
They just think I'm a nice fella. I'm just a country boy that grew up in that area.
I love it. I love it. I was driving up here early this morning. I passed this Edward Burroughs sign, or there's parts of I-95. It's got Edward L. Young, the Lunn Young, the old Lunn House not far from there, and it's fascinating to see the Terry B. Cooper Boulevard down on the Ocean Boulevard down in Surfside. There are a lot of names out there, but there's some requirements that have to happen before you get a name on a bridge.
I don't know whether it's a requirement or not, but I represented Florence County for 6 terms in the legislature before I became a judge, a part of the judiciary, and then when I was a resident circuit judge of the 12th Circuit, that was Florence and Marion County. And then, of course, I was reared in that area.
Right.
A little community called Mars Bluff. So
Mars Bluff.
So that's noted for the only place in the free world where an atom bomb fell.
An atom bomb fell in Mars Bluff, the only place in the free world.
That's
You're
right.
kidding.
No,
when did that happen? What do you... I don't even know what to say. I didn't know how to follow up on that question. That wasn't in your bio.
Thank God it didn't go off. I mean, it just blew a big old hole in the ground about as big as this building. But it was accidentally released from an old B-47 bomber, and it fell in Mars Bluff, right behind Walter Gregg's house. And my brother was in school in England at the time, and he picked up the paper, and it said, "Atom bomb falls on Mars Bluff." And he didn't know whether we were all blown away or not. And, never forget that. That's what Mars Bluff is noted for. Now it's noted for Francis Marion University is located in Mars Bluff, at Mars Bluff. The bomb fell about 400 or 500 yards from the present site of Francis Marion University.
That is amazing. That is something I'd never heard. I don't know how many times we've been together, either on air or in other places, David. I never heard that you were from the community that had an atom bomb dropped on it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What do you remember what year that was? Obviously, if your brother was in England, it must be within the last 60 years or so.
It was in the 60s. I can't remember now exactly.
That is amazing.
Early 60s, I guess. It may have been late 50s. I don't remember now, but it was
before you got in the legislature. Yes,
yeah.
Yes, before you got in there, and of course that must have been a startling thing. You mentioned your service there. It was 62 to 73. Then from 73, literally into the early 90s, you were in the judiciary. But
I retired in 94.
In 94. Wow, golly! So service from 62 to 94. Of course, when you were elected to the legislature, and then later. When you actually became a judge, the legislature was involved with that as well.
It still is. We are one of just 2 or 3 states that does not have public elected judges. Frankly, I think that's good. I do not like public elected judges. They get involved, in too much politics. And I don't think that's a good judiciary where you have that. But anyway, a joint session of both the House and the Senate elect your family court, your circuit court, your appellate Supreme Court judges in South Carolina, as well as a couple other states have that same procedure.
So all of the I mean, so there's not an instance where the associate justices will help appoint the chief justice. In that instance, it's still the legislature doing everything there.
Yes.
Wow. That's very interesting.
As a general rule, when you get to the level of the judiciary where you're talking about the Supreme Court, you usually become Chief Justice as a result of being the senior justice on the court. As far as I know, it's always been like that. You know, maybe back before the Civil War, it may have been different or something. I do not know, but
sure.
For the past 100 years, it's been the senior justice has been almost automatically elected. He's still elected by joint session of the House and Senate, but the senior justice becomes the Chief Justice. Which
is so often different in the world that your son just joined. You shared yesterday that one of your two boys is a federal judge in the PD in Florence. And, of course, oftentimes there, because of presidential appointment, you'll have someone brought in entirely from the outside because of a vacancy in the chief judge's slot, for instance, and they'll fill that with somebody who may not have the tenure on the bench, albeit I'm sure, or on that court, I'm sure.
Chief Justice Roberts, United States Supreme Court. He wasn't a judge.
He wasn't even a justice.
He's the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court.
That's a very good point. When my dad joined the bench in 1980, he was made chief judge, and having not been on that court, the court that Walter Cox, later joined.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a great tie-in. Walter Cox is a name that you're involved with now, and have been, I guess, involved with, or he joined the firm that you are a special counsel to.
Yeah.
Nelson, Mullins, Riley, and Scarborough. What was that like, going from being the chief justice of the state's highest court into joining a law firm and then interfacing with judges on the other side?
Well, it's trying to compare apples and oranges. I mean, I enjoy my work back in the legal profession. I do, as you well know, I do a lot of, I guess you'd call high profile or more complicated cases. I handle a lot of arbitration stuff, a lot of mediation stuff, and, tragic situations, security matters, business disputes, things like that try to help people resolve those disputes outside of the courtroom.
Without going to court, right.
Yeah. And that's basically what ADR is all about, alternative dispute resolution. And I enjoy that. I'm working with lawyers and working with the people that are involved in the dispute.
Right.
That is what I primarily do now. I do consult with lawyers from time to time about what I think is the better way to handle something, but I don't actually get involved in the heavy lifting of that. I'm more on just an advisory sort of situation. But as Chief Justice, you run the judicial system for the state of South Carolina. Everything from magistrate's court to family court to circuit court to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. You are the administrative head of the entire judicial system.
What a lot of work.
You prepare, you run the administrative part of it. You
David.
hire the staff, run the staff. It's very involved. In addition to that, I still carried my caseload and writing opinions, and I sat with the court in every hearing. And
doesn't sound like a job many people would want, David. That sounds terrible.
It's a working job.
Chief Justice Toll is going through a lot of the same thing now as you were from 91 to 94. She is the administrative head as well.
Yeah, she is the administrative head. But things have come along. I hate to sound like we were living in a Stone Age, but when I became Chief Justice, as far as administration is concerned, we were living in what I call the yellow pad pencil era. We didn't have computers. I started
in 91.
I started computerizing the courts, and Gene has picked up on that, and has done more and more and will continue to do more and more until we get the entire system computerized, which is good. We need it. I mean, the volume of caseload demands it. But we have administrative heads of the courts, and judges have to respond to the caseload needs and of the workload of the area.
Right.
So it's a very complex system, and it takes a lot of time to do it. In addition to that, as Chief Justice and as a member of the Supreme Court, we had to deal with all the disciplinary problems.
Oh, yeah. Of attorneys.
Judges and attorneys.
Judges and attorneys. Oh, no.
So that took some time. Thank God it didn't require an inordinate amount of time, but it takes time when you're dealing with ethical problems and, and stuff like that. You have to be careful about how you treat those things.
That's like having 3 or 4 jobs in one, David.
Well, a lot of hats as Chief Justice. You wear a lot of hats.
That caseload, writing opinions, working that through, interfacing with your clerks and otherwise. Obviously, the administrative side, taking us from a yellow pad and pen into a computerized world in the early 90s there. And then, as you said, some of the disciplinary actions, there's probably 6 or 7 more hats that you were wearing that we're not even thinking about.
Yeah. Not to mention, you're having to work with all the other members of the court. And judges from all over the state are calling you, saying, Judge, I've got a little problem. How would you like for me to handle this problem? And you try to advise and help as much as you can. You're all part of the judicial system, and back then we weren't near as big as we are now.
Right.
When I was a circuit judge, we didn't have a family court system. We only had 16 circuit judges to cover the entire state of South Carolina.
Wow.
We didn't have a court of appeals. Now they have, I think, 3 panels on the court of appeals. We only appellate court we had was the South Carolina Supreme Court, 5 members. The entire state judiciary, when I was a circuit judge, was a total of 21. 16 circuit judges and 5 members of the Supreme Court.
That is incredible. And
now we've got, I think, 50 circuit judges, 46 family court judges, I think 12 Court of Appeals judges, and 5 Supreme Court.
Now, does that mean that society is just more litigious, or does that mean that there's just not as far a backload of cases because it's being handled much more efficiently? What does that mean? We've grown so much population-wise?
A combination of all of that. Population-wise, we are as a result of being a very democratic society, we are a very litigious society. And that's one of the things that is of concern to me is the cost of litigation today to the average citizen out here. It's becoming prohibitive, and that needs to be addressed. The judiciary and the bar and the legislature, the business community, we really need to get together and try to do some reforms to cut down on the cost of litigation. Discovery has gotten out of hand.
Share with viewers real quick, when you say discovery, just for our viewers here on Friday morning at 7 a.m., just so they'd be familiar, when you say discovery, you mean?
When you have a dispute with your citizens or businesses or whoever, and you have to resort to bringing a lawsuit, the first thing that happens is you get served with a request to answer a lot of interrogatories. And after you get the answers to interrogatories, then they start serving you with notices to take depositions. And they take depositions of everybody involved in the litigation or that might know anything about the litigation, or expert witnesses. And these things are very, very costly. You can win the battle but lose the war. I mean, you can win the case, but your cost of handling that case or resolving that dispute can exceed the recovery that you might make. And we need to address that. Particularly for the average citizens, they just frankly can't afford to get involved in litigation. And big companies are wealthy people can literally go out and hire good lawyers and money whip you. I mean, just beat you down because of the expense involved in the litigation. And that's a serious concern that we need to address. The legislature needs to address it. The business community needs to address it. The judiciary, everybody needs to take a look at it. I think it can be managed by having some bright lines, that if your dispute involves a large sum of money or something that is really of major importance, then allow that kind of discovery to go on if it's necessary. But maybe if it's just a normal wreck case, let's say, or just a simple contract dispute that doesn't involve that much, maybe we ought to require something like sworn affidavits and enforce the perjury laws, you know, to cut down on this cost of litigation. When I was a lawyer, we didn't have all this discovery going on. You know when you have a lawsuit what it's all about.
Right.
And the people defending it, they know what it's all about. They don't need to spend that amount of time and money doing all this unnecessary discovery in these low profile, I guess you would call, disputes. They can be handled much more economically. And I'll be honest with you, the bar is partly to blame for it. You know, they are making a good living and they're charging by the hour or getting their costs built up in this thing. And all these things have got to be controlled.
Now, are you saying this, David, as a long time practicing attorney in the state, as former Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court, or as wearing your ADR hat, your mediation and arbitration hat? Where is this coming from? Because you're probably seeing it from all three perspectives.
You're absolutely right. I've seen it as a practicing lawyer. I've seen it from the way it was back in the late 50s when I started practicing law. And I've seen this thing grow and grow and grow, and it's just like a snowball. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's getting out of control. But I've seen it as a lawyer. I've seen it as a trial judge. I've seen it as an appellate judge, and I've seen it as in charge of the entire judicial system. It needs to be addressed. I would like an opportunity, frankly, to sit down with legislative leaders, bar leaders, business leaders, and try to help in this area, because it is a real problem now that is affecting society and the litigation that we have to deal with.
We've only got about 5 minutes, but a couple of things that you think just off the top of your head that would be the central focus of things that could be done. David, are there any, have you thought about any ways that could be, anything that could be done to help tackle that? I mean, is it, would alternative dispute resolution, some of those components, or?
And I started ADR. I started mediation, and it's mandatory now in many counties in our state, depending on the caseload in that county, because that is really right now the only relief in sight to get it out of the courtroom,
right,
and stop this expense from going and going and going and going. And you know, it's just not the expense of discovery. To the taxpayer, it's the cost of the trial. Right. You think about paying all the jurors, paying the judges, paying all the court personnel. That's a costly process. So if you can eliminate that, it saves the taxpayers a lot of money. And that's why I like mediation and arbitration. It's the more economical way to resolve these disputes. But there's still other things that can be done to cut down the cost of litigation, such as addressing this abuse of discovery.
Yes.
You know, judges can sanction lawyers for abusing the discovery process, but you get involved in litigation, judges are overwhelmed with motions and pleadings and things like that, you know.
Right.
And we've got to figure out a way to make it less costly for the average people to resolve their disputes. There's still a lot to be done in the judicial process itself. You know, as I mentioned earlier, when I was a circuit judge, we didn't have but 21 members of the entire judicial system. Now we've got several hundred.
Yes.
We've got 50 circuit judges, 46 families. We need to take a new look at the judicial circuits or districts. We need to cut down on the rotation of judges so young families won't, if the wife or the father who wants to be a judge can get at home at night and not be over in Pickens County if you live down here in Horry County.
Right.
And that judge can manage the system. Case can be assigned to him just like in the federal system. He can keep that case until it's disposed of. It's a much more efficient way of running the judicial system. I couldn't do it when I was Chief Justice because I didn't have that many judges. But now we have such a large pool of judges, it can be done. It's just going to take a little time to sit down and work out the tactical part of it.
I mean, you're a pretty well-known and well-thought-of guy, David. Do you think you'll have a chance to bring these parties together? Do you think they're all willing to work their schedules out to find the time to get together so that they can reduce their billable hours, so that they can reduce some of the caseload there and the crazy depositions that have gone well beyond where they should be?
I will be glad to devote my time to doing it, but somebody has to take the leadership, and that comes from the political side of government. They have to say, we want these changes, or we want some study made of these changes and recommendations made. And I'll be glad to work with anybody in that area because I do have the knowledge, you know, along with other people in the state to bring about the necessary reforms. But the political, you know, everybody likes the status quo. People don't like change too much.
Right.
That's just human nature. But these are things that really need to be addressed.
It has to be. It has to be. You know, when you're leaving the bench, David, you had an opportunity to be anywhere you wanted to be. What was it about Nelson Mullins? You know, we had a attorney in from Womble Carlisle, Sanders and Rice, recently, who said that the former governor of Maryland had just joined the firm. I think maybe even Jim Exum and others. There's former chief justices that have done well and gone on, and also like Uriah Harley, who are out there and joining firms. What was it about Nelson Mullins, Riley, and Scarborough that attracted you?
Well, again, I was interested in pursuing the alternative dispute resolution. They have the resources to support me in doing that, and they allowed me to do it, and you know, it was a good fit. I think, you know, they have offices just about everywhere. Washington, Boston, you know, Charlotte, Columbia, Greenville, Myrtle Beach. I just wish they had one in Florence.
You may be able to steer them that direction. You may be able to steer them.
But anyway, I've enjoyed my association with them, and frankly, I don't know how much longer I'm going to continue to be as active as I am, but as long as my health is good, and I can still think logically, I'm still want to work.
That's right. You shared with us yesterday about your grandchildren both in the PD here in our viewing area and here in our viewing area here at the beach, and that they're keeping you pretty dang busy. You and Debbie, of course, this weekend being Mother's Day, probably a lot going on Sunday.
We have more grandchildren coming in this weekend.
I bet. Golly.
But we enjoy having them.
Oh, yes. You know, you think back, David, had you not joined the legislature back in '62 and then later ascended to the bench in '73 and then ascended again in '80 or '81 and then ascended again even in '91, what do you think you'd be doing had you not, you know, yesterday, of course, you shared with us about your service in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. What do you think you'd be doing had you not gotten into the judiciary?
Well, I've always enjoyed the law, and so I think, you know, getting into the judiciary is something that a lot of people in the legal profession just say, you know, in my career, I would like to be a judge. In my particular situation, when I was in high school, we had two great trial lawyers in Florence. Both had served in the state senate at one time. One was George Keels and one was Peter McCann. And if you could afford them, and it didn't cost that much back then to go hire them, but I'd go to the courthouse and sit in the courthouse and listen to them try cases. It was better than watching movies. I mean, it was just fascinating. And so I've always been fascinated with the law. I've always been one for the outdoors.
Right.
I tell people I really wanted to be a game warden, but I found out when I got out of service what it paid, and so I just couldn't be a game warden. So that's how I went on into law. I've always enjoyed it, and it's been fascinating to me, and I still enjoy it. I still enjoy meeting the lawyers, and working with lawyers. Still enjoy working and trying to help resolve these disputes.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, we've run out of time. David, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with the Honorable David Harwell coming up next. Out of time yesterday. We ran out of time today. If you missed him yesterday, go to carolinapeople.com next week to check him out. Wish you'd heard him off camera. He's almost funnier and a better storyteller off camera than he is on camera. But if you didn't have a chance to be here today, surely take the time to spend some time there at carolinapeople.com and watch David Harwell Part 1 and Part 2 going live next week.